and you just don't know when your time is. I still remember getting a call from ESPN when I was on vacation and over in a different country. I wasn't even expecting it. She had watched, the editor at the time had watched a clip I did from 3 weeks before and said, I saw this and I saw your potential and I want to bring you in for an interview.
Wow.
And I didn't think, no, that video, I saw it online. It had 119 views on YouTube. That's it. And she was one of them. And that's all I needed. And so you never know who is scrolling on the TV. It doesn't matter if you broadcasting the game on ESPN 17. Somebody could be scrolling through on the middle of the day and say, I want to watch this game and watch it and hear your broadcast. It's like, wow, that was really good. And so you do your work, you do your broadcast as if, the general manager of ESPN or the executive at CBS Sports is watching. Yeah, because they might be one day.
Man, whatever, everybody, man. You're not listening and watching the Tackle Thursday with JK podcast. I'm your host, JK, and this is a self-help podcast that targets young adults in the midst of establishing foundations in their career, their relationships, and their role as a parent. And today, I got a special guest. He is a young adult himself, doing his thing in his career. My special guest for today hails from the SIP, Jackson, Mississippi, to be exact. If you graduated from the University of Houston, then you may know him because he is a Houston alum. And if you are an NFL fanatic, well, you follow football coverage in season, off season, postseason, specifically on NFL Network, then I know you see him breaking stories like Jalen Ramsey going from the Rams to the Dolphins, or doing a phenomenal job covering the Damar Hamlin story with intentionality and sensitivity and care. Ladies and gentlemen, y'all help me welcome this Mississippi kid who loves talking football, telling stories, and Southern rap, Cameron Wolfe. What up, Cameron?
What's good, Jeremy? I love that intro, man. That's got to be one of the best intros I've had, man. So I'm looking forward to a great chat.
Man, no problem, man. Hey, the one thing I try to prioritize whenever I have guests, man, is I want you to know that you're appreciated. And I feel like introducing you in a manner, that I can, with energy, enthusiasm, man, to show my appreciation. That's what it's all about, man. So I'm glad to hear that, man, and definitely excited to have you. Man, I want to start at the Mississippi kid, right?
Yes, sir.
I think I grew up where you living, reside, working a lot, right down there, Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, and I grew up big city, right? Yep. Going to the Heat games, going fishing, I'm bumping into Dan Marino, Jason Pierre-Paul, my teammate, Denard Robinson, my team, training with Patrick Peterson. So seeing big lights, seeing stardom, seeing superstars were kind of the norm, to where it's easy to believe what you can see. Right. But when I get to Mississippi, and I love Mississippians, man. My wife's side of the family is her mom's side is from Mississippi. Y'all are the nicest people in the world. Instead of giving y'all shirt off y'all back, y'all would give y'all car keys out your pocket to a stranger. And that literally happened to me when I visited Mississippi. So I can attest to that. But it's not a big city. It's not a huge, y'all don't have no, professional athletic team. Not a huge city where people just come and vacation. How were you able to cultivate a vision so big as a kid that included being on TV, national TV every day, despite you didn't see that all the time? How were you able to do that as a kid?
Now, that's a great question, because I am very much Mississippi in my roots. And, if you watch old videos of me growing up, you will hear the country accent that is going away. I very much had a country accent. I used to watch Walker, Texas Ranger on TV with my grandparents all the time, wear the cowboy hat, everything. One of my sets of my grandparents lived in a town called Bolton, Mississippi. A lot of them still do. And I tell you, it's so small, all the families had a city road with their last name on it. It was if they lived on that street, that was their last name, that was their street. Yeah. And we used to walk around outside, no shoes on. I was country as you can get. And I honestly did not envision myself in this TV role. And so a lot of it was due to circumstance. Reality was I always loved sports. 2-3 years old, I used to read the newspaper, the sports section of the newspaper, instead of playing outside or watching cartoons. That's what intrigued me, seeing the stats. I would always go to the agate section of the newspaper and look at the standings, look at the stats, look who did that. And as I got older, even talking like 8, 9, 10 years old, I used to be in the barbershop and they used to call me Stat Boy. because I
Yeah.
used to always have a stat ready. You know, the debates go on, who's better, LeBron or Carmelo? Well, I'm gonna give you stats on why LeBron is better than Carmelo and this and that. And everybody will be shocked. And that's sort of how my upbringing of sports came along, as well as playing sports. And, you know, I actually moved from Mississippi when I was about 8 years old, moved to Baton Rouge. My parents' job moved me out of Mississippi. I'm still in the South in Baton Rouge, but I'm out of Mississippi. And then eventually, a few years later, I moved away from Baton Rouge up to the Philly and Jersey area. And getting out of the South was really my parents doing. My stepdad at the time's job kind of transitioned him from step to step, you know, and so he moved up the ranks through his job, and we moved with him. And so one thing I always see in Mississippi, and I love it. I love my city. I love my hometown, but people struggle to get out. People get stuck in a sort of a transition of, hey, my mom's always been here. I got to stay with my mom. My grandparents always been here. I got to stay with my grandparents. A lot of times you can't grow. You know, a lot of times I go back and see my family, and they always tell me to come back. And I'm like, I can't come back. I got bigger things that I'm out here doing. I'll come back and show you guys love. But right now I've got to go chase these things out and create my life elsewhere. And so, I want to continue to put on for Mississippi and establish it as a place that eventually people want to be and see that great talent and great people come out of it. But I also have understanding the current situation of Mississippi is not ripe enough for me to grow in my situation. And so I had to find soil elsewhere. You know, if I'm a plant, you know, I got to leave and go get some great soil, and hopefully eventually I can come back and put some of that soil back in Mississippi. But right now I can't grow there. And so I still have a lot of my principles, a lot of my upbringing through Mississippi. But my establishment in this career has been when I seen things elsewhere. When I was in Philly and Jersey and seeing some of that growth. When I moved to Texas right before my senior year in college and really figured out this is what I want to do, and went to college at Houston and figured out, hey, this is what I want to do. Those reps, those experiences, seeing those people, being in those cities kind of set me up for this stage. And pretty much all of the mentors and relationships I built have been outside of Mississippi. They've been on the road kind of in my journeys throughout. And so it kind of shows to me that, and it really also set the stage for me to be willing to move and grow elsewhere. Because a lot of times in this career, you have to move around to be able to establish yourself and get growth. And so I think being able to move outside of my hometown and moving consistently kind of set me up for adaptability. And also gave me some range as far as the type of cultures I've been around, the type of cities and environments that I think have shaped who I am as a reporter and analyst.
Nah, definitely, man. You said something that because like I target young adults with this, and a lot of young adults are going through or having to decide, should I move, should I leave, should I go away for college, or should I leave for this career? And growing up in Florida, all of my family were we were in the same city.
Yep.
And when you grow up, and that's what me and my wife, we talk about it. She's like, how was it in Fort Lauderdale? You know, I know how it is in Mississippi. And I'm like, to be honest, it really doesn't matter the city if that's how, like, your family all in one spot, they all in one spot. And that's not the norm. Yep. And then when you leave to your family, it's like, oh, when you gonna come back? And it's like, but like when you go to college and you see, okay, this person left and settled and established in this place, or they traveled and moved around the whole, country, because that's what people do. The norm is not to your whole family to be in one spot. And so I just encourage young adults that are trying to decide, should I leave, should I stay home, that maybe, leaving is gonna help you grow. It might be difficult, uncomfortable, right? Discomfort brings growth, man. And so you talk about like moving a lot, and I know you as far as working for the Denver Post and ESPN and now NFL Network based in Florida, like how is that on you and I know your wife and your daughter, like how is that just moving a lot, or have you been able to stay still these last couple of years since you transitioned to NFL Network?
Great question. I think the biggest thing that helped me as far as the moving is that where I was in life, right? We all have different circumstances. And so I understand people who have trouble moving because they are supporting a parent, or they're in a situation where they feel like they can't leave given their current environment. But I did not have that. I was in a situation where my parents have been able to provide for themselves, and I was able to establish my life on my own. And I knew very early on in this career that if I had to go to Wyoming or West Virginia to go chase this job, I was going to do it. And
Yeah.
luckily I didn't have to go that small to start off, but I was willing to do it. And I still remember like early on, I had a relationship in college where that essentially ended as a budding point of, hey, my girl at that time wanted me to go chase something in a different direction that she wanted to chase. And I had my vision. This is what I'm doing. And a lot of times that's hard to have that vision, but that's the first step. If you really know that you want something, you have to be willing to go through everything that it takes to get it. And it's not always going to be pretty. A lot of times people look at my job and it's glamorous, right? You're on TV, you get to talk ball. I know players, I interview players, all these things. Like these are things that people dream of, right? They don't see that when you first start the job, sometimes they're paying you $24,000 a year and you're working at the smallest town you can imagine. And sometimes you got to work 2 jobs to survive. Sometimes you're working in a local news station and you're working news 6 days a week and sports 1 day just to make it by. And so you're not really doing what you want to do, but you're doing what you have to do to keep going through. A lot of times people don't see the times where you're getting rejection calls, right? Like I was in my internship in Denver Post, and I remember sending 62 resume takes out to news stations all over the country. I only got a response from 2 out of the 62.
Yeah.
One of them said, no, we're not interested, which I appreciate them saying something.
Yeah.
The 60 others ignored me. And one other offered me a job, I think, in like a tri-city area in North Carolina and something like that. North Carolina, Virginia, and one of the other cities out there. They were going to pay me less than $30,000 a year. And I was going to have to move within 3 weeks. And
Yeah.
I go to one out there. And those were my options. And that was a situation for a lot of people that might be like, you know what? Maybe this ain't for me. Maybe I need to start a new career. But I believe in God. I believe in what my vision was, my career was, and I stayed faithful to it. And I was willing to go to those jobs. But God took care of me. And a day before my internship ended, the Denver Post, the place where I was interning at, offered me a full-time job. And they essentially created a position for me. There was 2 Broncos beat reporters at that time. They wanted me to stay on to be the third reporter, which they didn't have a third reporter. They added me to the role because of what they saw in me in the internship, my ability to do video along with writing, and just sort of the stories I told during that element. So I was able to stay in a bigger city like Denver, in a place where I had already established a little bit of roots, and start my career off there. And then I also was blessed enough that the first year I covered that team full time, they won the Super Bowl. That was Peyton Manning and Von Miller and all those boys when they beat Cam Newton in that 2015 Super Bowl. And so because of that, I got to cover a Super Bowl winning team from year one. My girlfriend, who became my fiance, moved to Denver a few months later as well. And I was able to really start my adult life, in a place where I had an internship and I didn't know what the future was going to be. And so a lot of times your opening happens because your willingness to take a chance, right? I was willing to move to a place for internship. I was also willing to move elsewhere for a job because I didn't close my options. I think my options opened to me in a way that may not have regularly been opened. And so I think that's probably a sign for a lot of folks, that you have to be able to cross that journey, the willingness to cross the journey, to be able to get it. Like I tell people sometimes, like I remember in my college at University of Houston, I had several people who were journalism majors who ended up never getting into journalism because they didn't want to move. They didn't want to chase the grind. People who I consider more advanced or more polished than me at that stage of my career never got to that next step because they didn't want to go through the fire that it took. And I don't know their personal life. They might have had different things that prevented them in different stages. But for whatever reason, I was willing to go through the steps and they weren't. And that helped me continue through a path and grow more. And maybe they started a new career. And so in your individual career, for people who are listening, I think that you have to first establish, hey, is this something I really want? Am I willing to go through everything that it takes to get there? And then 2, let's go upon the steps of, how do I get there? How do I get there? For me, it was applying. It was me, is making contacts on the ground. It's for me figuring out who did what I did and picking their brains and following their paths. I think that's how you set yourself up for early success.
Man, you and I'm a believer in God, believe in Jesus Christ, and it's a scripture, and because I speak as well, and I did, talk about skill versus will, right? And you talk about the people that were in your school at Houston and broadcast journalism that you felt like they were more polished or maybe more skilled at the time. But even in the Bible, God said, hey, I not only do I call those that are skilled, but I don't just want the skill. He said, I want those that are willing, right?
Amen.
Skilled and willing. And to your point, you know, a lot of times we want to succeed in our bubble of comfort, right?
Yes.
And man, you took that risk, and you're right. Your job is glamorous, bro. I follow you. You know what I'm saying? I'm a fan of yours. I love what you do. You bring youthfulness to the industry. You bring swag, the music you put on your videos, the whole nine, man. Like
Absolutely.
you really doing your thing, man. So salute to you on that. But we don't see the backstory, and that's what I love interviewing people and allowing people. They see where you are, but let's show them, or they see the box, the puzzle box. They see that picture, but they don't know all the pieces that had to go together for that box, you know, to come to fruition, man. And so you talked about Denver, and I read that you said that up to that point when you covered the Super Bowl, that was your greatest moment in your career at that point. Now, you know, it's been about 4, 5, 6 Super Bowls since. Would you still deem that as your greatest accomplishment or greatest thing you have done in your career thus far? If not, what is that, you think?
Now, so the Super Bowl is special. It's special. There's nothing like it. I think I've covered 3 or 4 at this point in my career. When, if you asked me as a Mississippi kid, I would have thought it was a miracle to even go to a Super Bowl, you know,
Yeah.
at some point in my life, right? And so I'm extremely blessed. I never take it for granted. Every single day I wake up and I know I get to do something that people would dream of. And so it's weird for me to say now, but no longer is the Super Bowl the biggest thing that I circle. I think last year, or actually earlier this year, I covered a story that I think will stick with me forever. And it's not something that because it's glamorous, it's because of the impact it had on so much throughout the country. And I'm speaking about the Damar Hamlin situation. And so I covered the game Bengals Bills in Cincinnati, and it was really hyped up to be potential game of the year. You got Joe Burrow and Josh Allen. It's I think the game was the 1st or 2nd of January, so it's like just starting the new year, end of the season, and it's a Monday Night Football game. And I remember being hyped up. I'm doing TV, doing all these broadcasting, and I'm up in the press box in the first quarter, and Damar Hamlin is injured,
Yeah.
and silence, literally silence in the stands. 8, 9 minutes, 10 minutes. We don't know what's going on. I see CPR being done on the field. Like I told the person next to me, I've never seen CPR done in person before. A lot of times you see it on the movies. I understand the aspect of it. I've done CPR training with a doll, right? But I've never seen a person need it, and it's so violent. It's so visceral of a sight to see. And I had to spring into action because I was the reporter on site. Unlike ESPN, who broadcast that program at the time, they had 8, 10 people there because it's their program. I was the only NFL Network reporter. And so I was the only person on the ground. And we have an outlet that was going to cover this story. And I knew it was going to be me. And so there's a period where I'm like, dang, is this guy alive? Is he going to be okay? And there's the emotion and human perspective. But then there's also, you have to do a job. Your job is to deliver the information, deliver what's going on for people who can't see, and for people across the country who aren't even football fans, who aren't even Bengals or Bills fans, who are now drawn into this story because of the fear, because of what could happen, and what may happen to this young man. And so that story is one I'll remember forever because of just how far it reached, how many people texted me, how many people I think it reached, and really just what it took for me, because I had never been in a situation like that. You're covering touchdowns and tackles and who wins and loses. You're not covering like life. Is this person going to stay alive? Who is he? What is his legacy to the world at 22, 23 years old? Like, these are difficult life questions. And this is something where, like, I cover football and I ask myself all the time, what sort of impact are you making? Because a lot of times this is a game and it's entertainment. It's an escape for people. And I enjoy the game. I enjoy the escape, but I also want to make an impact beyond football. And this story really drew me into it. And it was not planned. Like I said, I went there planning to cover a football game. And I was outside that night, outside the hospital around 11:30 midnight, and stayed there till about 3, 4 a.m., woke back up there at 7 a.m. the next morning, or 6 a.m. the next morning. And pretty much from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., every night for the next 8 nights, I was outside that hospital covering that event, 14 to 15-hour days, no sleep almost, but I was just going off adrenaline. And I think I did a great job. Honestly, I can say that now. Like a lot of times you don't want to give yourself credit.
Yeah.
You're just kind of going. But looking back on it, hearing from everyone, I kind of just went. And, people ask, how did you deal with your emotions? I didn't. I just went. I
Yeah.
probably didn't hit me the gravity of the situation until like a week after, when
Yeah.
I'm just at home and I'm sitting back and I'm like, wow. But covering that story, being able to tell it from the ground level, being able to build a relationship with Damar's family while Damar was, still in a sedation period, being able to report news from that situation, do interviews, and really update America about this guy in a sensitive level, in a intentional level. This is a young Black man telling his story from that perspective. As a young Black man, I think was a unique experience, and hopefully was something that he appreciated. I know his family did, and those were things that I wanted to bring out. And I think your time and how you do the job prepares you for a moment, so you just don't know when your moment is. And for me, that's been the quintessential moment in my career. I've covered some law enforcement cases where guys have been arrested or this and that, but this story, more than anyone, I think challenged me as a human, as a man, as a reporter, not only a sports reporter, but as a reporter, going through the due diligence of making sure I'm correct on everything. There was some stuff flying around that wasn't accurate, that some outlets went with that we didn't go with. And so I think there's that story is probably the one that I think, and it may still be the same story 5 or 10 years from now, that I look back and say, hey, that's the one that I'll remember. That's the one that has been the story of my career.
Man, I want to applaud you because you did do a great job. And to me, you were the face of covering that story. I'm on social media scrolling. I see you, right? The interview from you, I believe you with the uncle,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
interviewing him. So I'm on social media. I see you. If I'm looking at another, TV station, they're using y'all footage
Mhm.
from that interview, man, and I'm all about speaking life into people, just like, the teacher spoke life into you when you were younger, said, hey, man, go write for the paper. You
Mhm.
get that opportunity to speak life. Like you're taking the story that you're covering, but you're also giving hope and encouragement because everybody on pins and needles, because as a former player, that like when they explained it, that is the contact came in the middle of a heartbeat. Um,
Mhm.
and that's what I'm like, that could have been me. That could be anybody. That
Right.
unlikely time that contact happened. That was crazy. And so I'm glad, thank the Lord, he's all right, doing great, back to playing.
Back to playing football.
Yeah,
Yep.
back to playing, man. And thanks to you covering that, man, with sensitivity, like I say, and care, and like you said, intentionality. And so that's dope, man. And I think nobody's gonna forget that because as believers in Christ, we've seen a miracle.
Yes.
Somebody, be risen from pronounced not living to now he's living in front of our
Absolutely.
eyes, man. So and that was amazing, man. And I know, coming up time, like I said, I want to respect your time. With you working with the Broncos, right? The first time you work the first year, boom, they go to the Super Bowl. You've been working with the Dolphins, we're covering them a lot, talking about Tua, got Jalen Ramsey, their defense. I've been watching you cover, man. You feel like what you think about the Dolphins and their chances, or can you talk on who you think might be in line for having a breakout season or in that running or winning the Super Bowl?
Yeah, for the Dolphins, I think this is the best roster they've had in 20 years, at least. And so this is their best chance to me. I think they have the right head coach in Mike McDaniel, who really uplifted that offense from one of the worst offenses in the league for the last couple of years to maybe the most exciting offense of football last year, with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, all that speed on the field. And Tua, when he was healthy, was playing really good ball. It led the league in passer rating, and that offense was explosive plays waiting to happen, right?
Yeah,
And now they hired Vic Fangio, a new defensive coordinator, bring in Jalen Ramsey to a defense that underachieved last year. And I think the Dolphins, it would not shock me if they win the AFC East. The Bills have been the champs of that division for a long time, but the Dolphins are coming. And the Jets, now with Aaron Rodgers, are coming. And
yeah,
so to me, that's the best division of football, the most intriguing division of football, because of it's really, to me, a three-headed race. And it's crazy because the Patriots, to me, are clear fourth, and they haven't finished fourth in that division since the first year of the Bill Belichick era. And
Yeah.
so it's such an intriguing division. I think the Dolphins season does depend on Tua's health. We all know that he's been hurt a lot. If he can stay healthy, and he's doing a lot this offseason, he's trying jujitsu to help him fall so he can avoid some of that head contact to the ground. He's put on several pounds of
Yeah,
muscle
I
to try to
seen
get him
that. I
stronger.
seen that.
He
Yeah.
looks jacked up, and he got a new helmet. And so he's trying different things to help him stay healthy. I think this Dolphins team could be really good. But the problem they run into is that AFC is super deep.
Yeah.
You got Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and they are not going anywhere. Them
Yeah.
boys are still going to be cold. You
Yeah.
got Joe Burrow and the Bengals, and they are hungry. They keep falling up just a little bit short,
Yeah.
to Kansas City, and so they're going to be hungry and coming. And then you got the Bills, and to beat the champ, you got to beat the champ, and that's the team that's been the champ of that division for so many years. You got a Lamar Ravens team. Now he's got the big bag. He's coming.
Weapons too. Yeah.
Weapons. I mentioned the Jets now with Aaron Rodgers. You got the Chargers with Justin Herbert. Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars were balling at the end of last year, making a run. And so I just mentioned 8 teams off the top of my head, and all of those teams could be in the Final Four. Like, none of those would shock me if they were in the AFC Championship. But only 2 teams could be in the AFC Championship. So
And all those teams have got quarterbacks that you said. All
exactly.
of them. So it's like, if you don't have a quarterback, like I'm out with the Titans. I'm living here. I'm rooting for them. But man, if you don't have a quarterback, not just any quarterback, elite status,
you gotta have that guy.
Everybody, you gotta have that. You gotta have him, whoever him is.
Yes,
you gotta have him,
and he don't have to be. You don't have to be the him. Like Patrick Mahomes is the him, but you gotta have one of hims, like one of the bag of hims, right? There's like 5 or 6 hims, right? And so it becomes so much harder for you to win. It's not impossible, because I mentioned the Broncos 2015 season. That's when I covered their championship. Peyton was not Peyton that year. He really struggled. That team was led by their defense with Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware, Keep Talib, Chris Harris, all those boys. And Peyton's leadership kind of guided them over the top. But the teams typically don't win that way. Typically, it's the quarterbacks. And so, I've covered the Titans. I spent a year in Tennessee covering the Titans. But it's going to be an uphill challenge for them this year, because right now, we'll see what Will Levis and Malik Willis develop to. But right now, Ryan Tannehill isn't good enough in my book to be able to compete with some of the guys I just named. And that makes it so much harder for a Titans team that's now like revamping under their GM Rand Carthon to establish. And so this seems like a transition year for them and a lot of teams. And so I'm eager for this year. It's going to be a fun one.
Gotcha. And then before I let you go, man, just like, how do you, because I want to thank you, you gave me some great advice when I reached out to you. I was like, man, I'm trying to get on the network. I've been calling games on NFL on ESPN platforms. And you basically just told me to be patient. And when you said it, I was like, why are you in a rush, Jeremy? Like, man, take every opportunity. So I'm blessed. I got some more games this year, college games, man. I got into college basketball, calling games now as well, man. So I appreciate that encouragement, man. And so how do you critique, or not critique, but talk about a player, right? Without because you got integrity, you got character, to where you're not like, I'm not trying to bash them, but I got to do my job and say what I say, but without bashing them. How do you balance that?
That's a great question. I'll share a brief story with you to kind of give you perspective of that, because I have not been perfect in that lane. My second year, actually my first year in Tennessee at covering the Titans for ESPN. That Titans team had a young secondary that was led by Logan Ryan, but they had some young guys like Adoree Jackson, LaShawn Sims, some other players who hadn't really established themselves yet. And I remember I was writing for ESPN at that time, also doing TV, but doing a lot of writing. And this was my first year at ESPN. I was trying to establish myself. Sometimes we know, as a smaller market Titans team, it's harder for their stories to get the traction on ESPN. And so I kind of learned that to get traction, you got to have a little bit more of an appealing hook to a story or a headline. Some people might call it clickbait, right? And so I wasn't trying to chase clickbait, but I was trying to tell a story that got people to read my story, so my numbers would go up, right? And so I wrote a columnized story after the Titans lost to I think the Houston Texans in Houston. It was, I think, a Thursday night football game, and it was ugly. I'm not gonna lie. This was Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson put up, I think, like 40 points on the boys. It was nasty. And so I'm writing a story, and the reality is Deshaun Watson made the defensive backs look really bad. And so I had a very colorful way that I wrote this story. And so I wrote a story, and I'm like, the Titans, this is essentially what I wrote. The Titans secondary was like a leaky roof. Then they just put some duct tape over it. And Thursday night, it was like a monsoon came and broke that roof open. And I used that comparison as the lead of my story. I thought it was clever. I used a nice little headline to compare this. It's like the Texans, like, poured down through this, this leaky roof. When I tell you, the boys in the locker room were not happy with that. They had read the story. I got in the locker room, and this is one thing I will tell young journalists that I always was proud about myself with. I would always show up. I hate the reporters or the TV people, especially if they're local, who will write a hit piece or write criticisms, and then you can't find them. I always showed up the next day. And so the next day I'm in the locker room and I'm roaming, and I didn't know that there was going to be heat, but I walked to the defensive back side of the room and I got some stares. First some stares, and then a guy walked back and looked, and he said, "Did you feel that? I think it's leaking from the ceiling." And I could tell the reference there. And so there's a reference there. There was another reference to something else. And then Logan Ryan said, "Hey, can I talk to you outside?" And so I'm like, all right. He pulls me outside of the locker room. We're talking. And he was like, I didn't like what you wrote. He said, especially because I think you're really hard on our young guys. And he said, these guys are trying to grow. And he said, there's ways that you can criticize. And I think that you went too far. And he said, a lot of those dudes were really hurt about that. And he said, a lot of times I'm trying to build their confidence up and you're tearing it down. And you're making my job harder. And he's like, I don't mind that you can critique, because we did have a bad game. But I think that there's a way that you can do it with taste, and you don't tear anybody down or attack anybody individually. And I told him I appreciated it, because it was a lesson for me. And I it's changed how I go about the job. So there's a way you can critique without criticizing. I hate when people call people bums or say they're trash. Like, these were professional players. They're good in their gig. They might have struggled. There's a way to say, hey, if you threw 4 interceptions, you had a bad day. You had a rough showing. But you are not an awful quarterback. You are not, get him off the field. He can't throw the ball to a high school, at a high school. Like, that's where you go too far. And so I think you can be critical, but don't overdo it where you're just trying to make fun of, you're trying to make light of someone else. And so I think I've changed my critique if I'm critiquing someone, I'm going to be very direct and intentional and tell you what they did wrong, why they struggle, what the impact is. I'm not going to go out of my way to make jokes, have fun with it, and kind of stomp on their grave, so to speak, on the process. And to me, that's how I gain respect while I criticize, because it all can't be positive. We're reporters. We're not PR people. And so if somebody's struggling, you got to tell them that you're struggling. If a team's doing bad, if a coach is struggling, you got to say, hey, man, they got to look into some different changes, or this might be the end of the road. It's the reality of the situation. There's ways you can go about it. But I think the conversation I had with Logan Ryan just taught me that, 1, players read stuff, and 2, you got to think about how are you individually attacking players, right? You don't, there's so much reason why people call this a team game. Part of it is because individuals get praised and individuals get attacked. And a lot of times we look at that as a very macro situation. You see it on sports debates. When they talk about the game, oh, did LeBron fail? Or did LeBron succeed? It's not that the Lakers succeed. The Lakers fail. Did LeBron fail? You put it on one player. You put it over on pressure. And I get it. It's a star league. But sometimes that is unfair in how we go about it. And football, more than anything. Basketball is a little bit more individualized. Football is so more than anything. There's so much that we don't see. And this is one thing I've also been better at. I played football, and I know defensive football more than probably anything. But a lot of times we're guessing on things that we don't truly know. Cornerback gets beat on coverage. You say the cornerback got burnt. Well, you didn't know that the safety was supposed to be over the top.
Cover 2.
And it was in a different cover, and you didn't know that. And so you're critiquing the corner. You're telling everybody the corner sucks. He got beat this. And the corner, that wasn't even his responsibility. And so you're just wrong. And you're telling everybody a wrong information. And so I am very intentional on asking. That's your job as a reporter. You see hey, I saw this on this coverage. What was going on there? Oh, yeah, that was my bad. I was supposed to have the flat, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now I can tell the people what happened. Okay, I did my homework. I can tell you that. And so for me, do my homework a lot more. Don't be overly critical as far as not critical. Don't be over attacking when you attack individuals. And then when it's going bad, don't stomp on their grave with jokes just for the fun of it. That's probably ways that I can go about critiquing. without going over the top.
Man, that's real, man, and I take that. I'm gonna take that because even when I'm calling the game and a guy makes a great catch over a DB, I still gotta respect the DB that was in the
Right.
play and not
Right.
stump on him
And
because
you can have fun. You can have fun with it too. Like that
yeah,
example you said, he mauled him. He
yeah,
mauled to me. That's not disrespectful of
yeah,
the defensive back. Now, if you're saying, "Hey, that man," I don't know what you could say. You could go, you can
yeah,
go over
yeah,
the top. That defensive back looked like a mushroom.
yeah,
Like if
yeah,
you're attacking the individual, right? If you're praising somebody else, he juked him out of his shoes. To me, that's fine.
yes,
Hey, sometimes you get juked out of your shoes,
big facts.
but there's a way that you can explain and critique
Yeah.
without being overly criticizing the individual.
Man, definitely, man. Well, hey, thank you so much, man. Ladies and
Absolutely.
gentlemen, hey, my special guest, Cameron Wolfe. You could catch him on NFL Network doing his thing. He always at the events. He was at the softball game watching Tua hit home runs out the park and Waddle, man. Hey, thank you so much, Cameron. Keep up the great work. I look forward to just all the amazing work you're going to do this upcoming season. I'm definitely going to pay attention to that AFC. Hopefully you're right about the Dolphins. My dad's still holding on to the 1972 season, man.
A
Man, you look,
lot of Dolphins fans are, man.
hey, man. I'm like, let it go. He like, no, son, we still got it. This could be the year. So, hey, to all those that rock with the Tackle Thursday with JK podcast, continue to wake up, striving to win on purpose, be intentional about winning, and y'all have a blessed day.